Impacts of climate change, terrestrial species. Warming temperatures are causing insects to migrate to new areas. Insects such as butterflies, beetles, dragonflies, and grasshoppers have already been observed moving to new areas and changing their traditional migration patterns. Plants and insects rely on one another to mutually survive. The time period of migration, bud blooming, and pollination is disturbed, then both insects and plants are negatively affected. For example, bees and flowers. If a flower is ready to be pollinated before a bee is ready to pollinate, then the pair no longer works together. If temperatures become too hot in general, the insects can move to a new location where their plant pair doesn't exist. Venomous species migration and activity. Many venomous species are ectotherms. This means the animal relies on the environment to provide heat for their bodies. When the temperatures are warming, this has allowed the venomous species to move into new area, which exposes humans to more interactions with them. As well, the active season of these species is the time in which the species is above ground. This has lengthened due to warming, and this means the creatures are having more interactions with humans and other species, causing danger. A study performed in the Americas predicted snake migration to new areas through 2050 could include the northern United States, Canada, Argentina, and Chile. This expansion would incorporate 5.5 to 6.7 million more people being at risk for snake bites.
All right, so here's a species that everybody should be familiar with, polar bears. And as many of you know, they're extremely affected by global warming. Specifically the way they hunt. So they require a lot of ice cover over oceans in order to hunt seals, as they sort of ambush them near the places where seals come up to breathe. And when global warming causes less ice cover to be available, this causes polar bears to catch less seals. So what we're seeing is a diet shift away from seals in polar bears and towards different means of getting their nutrition. And some of these are really interesting, like caribou, geese eggs, and even geese themselves are being hunted by polar bears. And the general trend that we're seeing is that species are moving away from the equator. There's a study done in the UK in 2010 where an individual named Chris Thomas spent some time looking at the ranges of different species over time in the UK and noticed that 84% of them actually moved polewards in that period of time. And this was both indirectly and directly due to climate change, where some species were moving simply because it was too warm in their initial habitat, and others were moving in response to those species changing their ranges.
Another way in which climate change impacts terrestrial species is through localized extinction, which can be a precursor to more major extinctions. When faced with climate change, species have three choices. They can either adapt, move to a new location, or go extinct. And when the climate becomes intolerable, the range which populations of certain species inhabit can shift, showing that they're failing to adapt. Although climate change is just beginning, change in habitat ranges is already being observed. Because across a group of 27 studies published between 2014 and 2016, researchers found that 41.7% of the species observed experienced warm edge contractions, which means that the populations at the lowest latitudes disappeared, resulting in a habitat shift. And as climate change becomes more drastic, this is only going to increase. Localized extinctions can also be observed in the Chaco Serrano forests, which were fragmented as a result of land conversion back in 1970. These fragments were analyzed in 2003, and 229 plant species were found to still inhabit the area. But when the land was resurveyed in 2013, only 163 species remained, which was a loss of 24%. The remaining species tended to be those with longer lifespans and lower turnover rates, while the ones that had gone extinct had shorter lifespans and faster turnover rate. The delayed extinction in this area highlights the idea of extinction debt, which means that extinction may not occur instantaneously after a change in habitat. While the extinction in the Chaco Serrano forest took place as a result of land conversion, extinction debt can also relate to climate change. since it'll give the false impression that organisms are able to adapt to their new climate, when in reality, the extinction is just being delayed.
All right, so how is extinction measured and why should it be changed? So first we have the species area relationship, which is a statistical method that extrapolates how many species can live in a closed area. Then there's the informal 50-year rule, which is there's no sightings of a species in the past 50 years, and scientists must show repeated efforts to detect evidence of the species' continued survival. So the rate at which species are going extinct is over 1,000 times faster than previous mass extinctions. So what does this mean? This means that we're taking reactive measures instead of preventative measures. So what affects extinction? So there's habitat loss, both marine and terrestrial. There's natural causes. There's pollution, liquid, solid, gas, and then there's exploitation by humans, such as overfishing and overhunting. When two or more of these threats is combined, they're called synergistic interactions and accelerate a species extinction even faster. So why do we care? Each species is required for its interactions with other organisms. And when you take one species out, it sets off a chain reaction throughout the local and global ecosystem. As humans at the top of the food chain, we'll see extreme consequences very quickly. Taking out pollinators, for example, will deal a huge blow to the agricultural industry and our economy as a whole. Thank you. Okay.